Greetings, this is Seriously Planning. My name is Shagufta, and today I'm doing a July wrap-up. This has been a really lovely month of reading. I normally don't do reading wrap-ups, but I really wanted to do one today. And I'm not going to discuss everything I've been reading. This month I read 6 books. I started 8, 2 I didn't quite finish. They're still on the go. 6 I did, and this has been really exciting because this has been one of the first months where I've been able to go back to my public library. This whole couple of years I've been using the digital collection at the public library, but I haven't been getting physical books. And things are opening up, and I feel more comfortable now, and so I've been really using my public library, which has been lovely. And this month some really wonderful holds came in, and I want to discuss both I've been reading and also how these books have kind of been talking to each other. And so I'm just going to jump in. And these aren't really in order of reading, but so this month I read 6 books. All of them were library holds except for one, which I bought, which was a pre-order, and that was a digital book that I read. But everything else has been from the public library, so yay, public libraries. And so the first book this month, which is kind of unusual for me, I read a few YA novels. And the first one that I read is Misfit in Love by S.K. Ali. And this is a sequel to an earlier book called Saints and Misfits by S.K. Ali, and that came out a couple of years ago. And I think for some reason, strange coincidence, like it was exactly 2 years from when I read Saints and Misfits that I read Misfit in Love. And so Misfit in Love is about the same characters. Jenna is the main character's name, I think. Yeah, Jenna Yusuf, and her brother is getting married in this book. And this book starts out and she's in the pool and she's thinking about this guy who's her friend, who she's ready to tell that she likes, and she wants to move their relationship forward. And she's really excited because he's coming this weekend, and the book is basically about the wedding weekend. And I think I liked it, but I think I wasn't quite the target audience. If you are like 16, 17, 18, you're probably the target audience of this book. I really, Saints and Misfits, the earlier book, was heavy. It dealt with issues of community accountability and assault and really important issues. And this book is about what it means to be on the cusp of like transition, and what it means to like someone and kind of navigate that space, and what it means to like navigate transitions in your own family. So there's a lot in this book about transition. And what I found is that there were times where I was cringing for the main character and really wanted her to look at things with like a different lens, or just take a step back and analyze things. And I think maybe the book is meant to give you sort of that cringy feeling of like, why is she so stuck in her head, and why doesn't she just step out a little bit? This book I read without a lot of plot awareness, and so I don't want to tell too much about what the plot was, but I did really like it, and the cover is beautiful. I always do this when I kind of do book reviews, is admire the covers. I really liked the cover, but one thing I found is that it's a 2021 book, and it sort of attempts to do a bunch of issues at the same time. It's looking at Jenna, it's looking at her family, it's looking at her relationship with her mother, how she's growing up, and it's also trying to talk about anti-Black racism in the Muslim community, which sort of works, sort of, I don't know, kind of does, kind of doesn't. So there's a lot in there. Overall, I liked it. I didn't love it, but I do think it's a cute book, and if you are within the target age range, I recommend it. So then the second YA novel I read was An Emotion of Great Delight by Tahira Mafi. I think Tahira has written a bunch of different books. She has a series called the Shatter Me series, which I haven't read. The book of hers I have read is called, I think it's called A Great Expansive Sea. That might not be the exact title. And that book is super happy. It's about someone, navigating transitions, figuring out hijab, figuring out first crushes, and the main character likes break dances, and it's like a very joyful book. This book is very different. It's about a family. It's set in 2000 and 2003, I think, and it goes between two different time periods. So the current time period and then the year before. And something has happened in that year before that has totally broken the main character. And the main character's name is Shadi. And Shadi wears hijab. There is a lot of Islamophobia around her. We find out what has kind of happened to her family over the course of the book, but you know from the outset of the book that she is sort of at the crumbling point. She is breaking, and you don't know exactly why. And it's because it's set in 2003. I read this over the course of an evening, like curled up on my couch, and it is difficult to kind of go back and think about the U.S. Not that Islamophobia is that much different nowadays, but it's a very particular period that the author is describing. But it is a stunning book. So again, I wasn't necessarily the age bracket for this book, but I loved it. Her writing is stunning. The other characters I think they're well defined. I really liked it, although it just felt sad. Like, it is a book where I felt heavy afterwards, and it felt difficult to really know that things were going to happen or have happened to these characters. But I think the way the author holds that tension throughout the book is really well done. So I really like this. Also really love the cover of this book. And I highly recommend. This is probably my favorite. I read 3 YA novels this month, unintentionally. Just when the library holes come in, that's what you read. And this is the one that I loved the most. The third of the YA novels that I read was Instructions for Dancing by Nicola Yoon, who I love because I read The Sun is Also a Star. That book deals with immigration and race and what America is. This book is very different. It's about personal grief, transition, about families changing, about what it means to hold on hope even when it is really hard and may not be rewarded. What is the nature of hope, and what does it mean to hold hope as a practice? I think the other book was so meaty that this one it took a moment for me to get into like just the micro nature of these challenges, but I loved it. This story is about a girl who, and I'm forgetting all the main characters of these stories, but Evie, and she has sort of given up on love because her parents, whose marriage she treasured, are no longer together. Her father wasn't faithful, and she's keeping that sort of secret to herself. And so she has sort of she's been a person who like loves rom-coms, and so she's lost hope. And she gets in a situation where she can suddenly see people's futures of their love story, and also starts dancing at a dance studio. And so this book is about kind of those two things, about her friendship circle, about, again, what it means to sort of enter into a new phase of life. It's very cute. Again, it's like an afternoon curled up on the couch. I had a bike accident in June. And so a lot of my time this month has been indoors reading, and this was a really cute book when it was sunny and I couldn't do a lot of other things outside. So those are the YA novels. The other 2 books that I really, really, really loved, and I want to have separate episodes about them. The first one is called The 9 Lives of Rose Napolitano. I think that's how you pronounce it. And this book is fascinating. I actually have it on Kobo. I had bought it a few months ago, but hadn't had a chance to read it yet. And then I saw it in the library and thought, oh, I really want to read this book. And this book is about Rose, is the central character, and it starts out with her and her husband having a fight about prenatal vitamins because she had made a promise that she was going to take prenatal vitamins. They had this sort of ongoing conversation about kids in their relationship. She doesn't want them. They were on the same page, and now he's changed his mind. And so she had decided to take prenatal vitamins, and he finds the tablets, and they are half full or quite full. And so from that, in that opening chapter, that fight then results in her husband leaving her. But what the book is, it's 9 different iterations, 9 different permutations of how that fight could go, what might happen to her life, how she negotiates this decision to have or not have kids, what does that mean for her, how big of a decision is that, how life altering, what happens if she decides yes, what happens if she decides no. It's 9 different versions of what that could look like. And it is fascinating because in each scenario, you see certain things that are common. I don't want to sort of give too much about the story, but I found it like a very almost spiritual read of like who you are versus what the design of your life is, and what it means to hold true to what is true for you, but also how sometimes those things change and sometimes those things don't change. And I loved it. I'm still thinking about this book, and I think it holds the ideas of grief and commitment and trueness to self very well, and it doesn't disparage the decision to have kids or not to have kids. Either way, it just explores with real deftness what that can look like for different people. And so, or not even different people, the same person, but different versions of who that person is, and also what's core to that person through that entire journey. So I really loved it. I want to do a separate post about this book that I highly recommend. And then the final book that I want to talk about is The Color of God. This is a memoir. This is the only memoir that I read this month. And this is a memoir by a Vancouver writer. Aisha Chaudhry is a Vancouver-based Islamic studies scholar at UBC. And this is her story about, the book starts off and it's about her describing a moment of deep tragedy in her family where her nephew passes away. And she describes how that was like a real life-altering journey or event. And then the rest of the book is sort of snippets about her life that is from the beginning. There's a lot of time spent on childhood, and then also later on, sort of different chapters about body hair, or a chapter about children, or another chapter about jet skiing in while being covered. So the book, it's a really interesting story. It's a story about what it means to grow up in a particular community, in a particular environment where you are, religion is very specific, it's very conservative, and then to find your own way. And that premise, I think I approach this book with a lot of hesitation, because that can be done very poorly. It can fulfill a lot of sort of Islamophobic ideas. And I really love this book because it really explored the ideas that readers might have when hearing the premise of this book, when hearing this story, and challenges readers to sort of find a different way to both hear this story and to check their own prejudices. I have a separate audio podcast where I get into more detail about my thoughts, but overall I really liked it, and I found it a fascinating story and very thoughtful and very tender. And so that's kind of my month of July. Overall, what I found is like a lot of these books unintentionally dealt with transition, dealt with grief, and dealt with what it means to explore ideas of Islam. So across, particularly the three books I had around Muslim authors, they would talk about, different ones talked about like colorism or anti-Black racism in different ways. They talked about what it means to have ideas, to be battling stereotypes all the time. And they approached it from different perspectives, but similar also opinions as well, but from their particular subject matter and the particular stories. And it feels, all of these are kind of new books, and it feels interesting in this time when we are like dealing with a pandemic and coming out of that grief seems to be such a strong theme. I would say out of all the themes, that grief feels like such a strong theme in all of what I read, and is something I think I'm thinking about a lot these days, just as I make meaning of what this last year and a half has been. And so that's all for our video. Excuse me. That's all for my July reading. Till next time, this is Seriously Planning.